The summer sun blazed over the small frontier town of Red Creek, turning the dusty ground into shimmering gold. Flies buzzed around the wooden auction stage that stood in the center of town, surrounded by rough-looking men with whiskey on their breath and greed in their eyes. They had gathered not for cattle or horses this time, but for something far crueler. A burly farmer with a red beard stood on the platform, his boots creaking on the wood. Beside him stood a tied Apache woman, her wrists bound with coarse rope, her feet bare and dusty. Her hair hung in long black braids, her face proud yet hardened by suffering. The crowd laughed and spat tobacco as the farmer raised his hat and shouted, "All right, boys. Today's deal of the century, buy a cow, get a working Apache woman for free." The men roared with laughter. Some slapped their knees, others whistled. "She can cook, clean, and fight coyotes." The farmer added mockingly, pulling her forward by the arm. She didn't flinch. Her name was Ayanna, and though her spirit had been battered by capture and cruelty, her eyes still held the fire of the mountains. But no one saw that fire, no one except one man. Standing at the back of the crowd, leaning against a hitching post, was a cowboy. His hat shadowed his face, but his eyes, cold blue and steady, watched every move. His name was Luke Carter, a former ranch hand and Civil War scout who had seen more injustice than any man deserved. He had come to Red Creek to sell cattle, not to witness the selling of souls. The farmer slapped the cow's flank, grinning. "Come on, boys, who's man enough to take the pair? She don't eat much, and she's tougher than half of you." The laughter rose again, but Luke's stomach turned. He'd seen Indians hunted like animals during the war, but seeing one mocked in peacetime somehow felt worse. Ayanna's gaze drifted across the faces of the men who were bidding, eyes filled with lust, cruelty, and greed. Then her eyes stopped on Luke. For a moment, their gazes locked. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just looked at him with quiet defiance, as if daring him to see her humanity. Luke pushed off the post and stepped forward. The laughter dimmed as his spurs clinked against the wood. He moved like a man who'd already made up his mind. "I'll take her," he said, his voice low but firm. The farmer blinked. "You sure, cowboy? She ain't exactly gentle stock." Luke tossed a silver coin onto the platform. "I'm not buying her to work. I'm buying her freedom." The crowd went silent. For the first time, Ayanna's eyes widened. The farmer hesitated, but greed won over pride. He caught the coin and shrugged. "Suit yourself." Luke stepped up, cutting the rope from her wrists. The moment the bindings fell away, Ayanna's lips parted, but no words came. Luke looked into her eyes and said quietly, "You're free now, ma'am. Let's get you out of here." And as they walked away through the scorching dust, the town of Red Creek watched in stunned silence, while somewhere deep inside Ayanna, something that had long been broken began to heal. The sun was setting behind the jagged hills when Luke Carter guided his horse, Dusty, down the long trail away from Red Creek. Behind him, Ayanna walked barefoot, refusing to ride. Luke had offered her his horse more than once, but each time she shook her head silently. Pride still burned strong in her chest, stronger than pain. Luke didn't press her. He understood that kind of pride, the kind that keeps a person alive when everything else has been stripped away. So, he simply rode alongside, keeping his voice low and his distance respectful. The desert wind whispered between them, carrying the scent of sagebrush and smoke. "You got a place you're headin'?" Luke finally asked. Ayanna hesitated. Before answering, her English halting but clear. "My tribe, gone. Soldiers took them south. I have no home now." Luke nodded, jaw tight. "Then you can stay at my ranch a while. Ain't much, but it's safe. No one'll bother you there." She looked up at him with wary eyes, unsure if she could trust this stranger. "Why you help me?" Luke exhaled slowly. "Because I once saw good people get treated like dirt. Because no one should be sold like livestock." For a long moment, Ayanna said nothing. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "White men don't help Apache women." Luke's voice softened. "I ain't most men." The trail stretched on into twilight. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the stars began to bloom above the desert sky. By the time they reached Luke's small homestead, the air had turned cold. It wasn't much, just a wooden cabin, a corral, and a small barn, but it felt like another world compared to the cruelty of Red Creek. Luke dismounted and opened the barn door. "You can rest here tonight if you'd like," he said gently. "There's hay, water, and it's warm." Ayanna frowned. "You sleep where?" Luke smiled faintly. "I'll take the porch. Don't worry, I won't come near." You got my word. Something in his tone, steady and honest, made her believe him. She stepped into the barn, wrapping herself in an old blanket he handed her. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace. Outside, Luke sat on the porch steps, rolling a cigarette he didn't bother to light. His thoughts wandered to the war, to all the times he had seen people turned into monsters by hate and fear. He wondered if helping one woman could ever make a difference. Inside, Ayanna couldn't sleep. She stared up at the wooden rafters, listening to the sound of crickets and the soft breath of the horse nearby. Her wrist still burned where the rope had cut her skin, but beneath the pain was something new, hope. She whispered softly into the night, words from her people's tongue that Luke could not hear. They were a prayer, not for revenge, but for rebirth. And outside, under the same stars, Luke whispered too. You're safe now, miss. As long as I'm breathing. For the first time in a long time, both the cowboy and the Apache woman felt that maybe, just maybe, their broken pasts could find healing together in the quiet heart of the desert. Days passed on the Carter Ranch, and a strange rhythm settled in, a quiet, respectful distance between Luke and Ayanna. She rose early, helping with chores without being asked, fetching water, mending tack, feeding the animals. Her movements were graceful yet firm, the way only someone hardened by survival could move. Luke noticed, but he never said much. Words weren't her language, strength was. One afternoon, as the sun blazed across the desert, Luke found her standing near the corral, staring at the horizon. Her expression was distant, haunted. You keep looking that way, he said softly, leaning against the fence. Expecting someone. Ayanna shook her head. I listen, she said. Wind speaks of spirits. My people, maybe they still near. Luke tilted his hat. Maybe they are. Maybe they're watching you rebuild. A small, fleeting smile touched her lips, then vanished just as quickly. She limped slightly as she turned, favoring one leg still bruised from the trader's whip. Luke noticed it, and it made something twist deep inside his chest. That night, while Ayanna tended a small fire outside, Luke came out of the cabin carrying a tin cup. He handed it to her. Coffee. Not much, but warms the bones. She accepted it hesitantly, her fingers brushing his gloved hand for just a heartbeat. That single touch seemed to bridge a distance wider than the desert itself. You fought in the war? She asked suddenly. Luke stared. Into the fire. Yeah. Fought for freedom, they said. Didn't feel much like it when it was over. Folks came home mean, broken. Some took it out on anyone who looked different. Guess I've been trying to make peace with that ever since. Ayanna nodded slowly. I fight too. But I fight for life, not land. My people lost everything. Luke looked at her then, not as a stranger or an enemy, but as someone carrying the same kind of scars. Maybe we both did, he said quietly. The night deepened around them, filled with the soft hum of crickets and the low whinny of a horse. Ayanna's eyes glistened in the firelight, reflecting a sorrow too deep for words. When she spoke again, her voice trembled. Men, they hurt me. In camp. Before they sell me. Luke froze, the weight of her confession crushing him. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then he placed his hat over his heart and said softly, I'm sorry, Ayanna. You didn't deserve any of that. No woman does. Tears fell silently down her cheeks, and she turned away. Luke didn't move closer, he knew that pity could wound deeper than cruelty. Instead, he said, you got my word, no man'll ever touch you again without your say-so. Not here. Ayanna looked at him then, really looked. For the first time since she'd been sold, she saw a man who wasn't trying to own her, just protect her. And in that fragile moment, something inside her began to mend. As the moon climbed higher, the two sat side by side in silence. Ayanna's heart still carried the pain of the past, but in Luke's quiet presence, she found a flicker of something she thought she'd lost forever, trust. It was small and fragile, but it was there. And in the wild, unforgiving heart of the West, that was enough to start again. Spring came slowly to the desert. The once barren land around Luke Carter's ranch began to bloom with small patches of green, and the air turned softer, gentler, almost as if nature herself had decided to start over. So had Ayanna. She could walk without limping now, her steps steady and sure. The wounds on her skin had healed, but the ones in her heart were still learning how. Each day she helped Luke mend fences, milk cows, and break in new horses. Her laughter, soft, rare, and unexpected, had started to return. Luke never said it aloud, but the ranch no longer felt lonely. When he'd bought that poor woman months ago, he thought he was saving a life. He didn't realize she'd end up saving his too. One afternoon, a cloud of dust rose on the horizon. Luke squinted, his hand shading his eyes. 3 riders approached fast. Their coats bore the insignia of the U.S. Cavalry. His jaw clenched. Trouble. When the soldiers arrived, their leader, a stern man with a silver mustache, spoke coldly. "We're looking for a runaway Apache woman. Escaped from a prisoner camp south of here." Ayanna froze near the barn door, a bucket of water trembling in her hands. Luke stepped between her and the soldiers. "You must be mistaken," Luke said evenly. "Ain't no one here but me." The captain dismounted, eyes narrowing. "Funny thing. Folks in town said a farmer rode out with a woman 2 months back. Red Creek auction." Luke's hand drifted to the revolver at his hip, but he didn't draw. He just said, "That woman was treated worse than an animal. I paid for her freedom, not her servitude." The soldier sneered. "You harboring her makes you guilty of treason." Before Luke could respond, Ayanna stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. "No, not him. Me. I go." Luke turned, his heart pounding. "Ayanna, no." She laid a hand on his arm. "You give me life again. I not let them take it from you." The soldiers grabbed her wrists roughly, but Luke's patience snapped. In one motion, his revolver was out, aimed steady at the captain's chest. "You touch her again, and I swear you'll answer to me," he growled. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, from somewhere behind the soldiers, a familiar voice called out, "Deputy Harris from Red Creek." "Captain, that ain't no runaway." The sheriff himself cleared her. "The farmer bought her fair and legal." The captain scowled, spat on the ground, and finally waved his men off. "You keep your savage, Carter. But don't say we didn't warn you." When they rode off, Luke's hands finally trembled. Ayanna was crying, not from fear, but relief. He turned to her and said softly, "You don't ever have to run again." That night, under a silver moon, Ayanna sat beside him on the porch. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "You saved me, Luke Carter." Luke smiled faintly. "No, Ayanna. We saved each other." The desert wind whispered through the open fields, carrying with it the promise of a new beginning. And as dawn broke over the horizon, 2 souls, one broken by war, the other by captivity, finally found peace in each other's company. In the wild heart of the Old West, love wasn't always born of beauty or youth. It was born of survival, courage, and the quiet hope that even after all the pain, life could still begin again.